I was walking through a mall once, years ago, and I walked past this guy who smiled at me and he said, "You don't like adventure, do you? We are typically more social, friendly, like to feel liked, like to like people, that kind of thing, make connection. And so I'm more easily led to emotional buying than maybe others might be."
So, what drew you to this line of work, sales, leadership, training?
I wish I could say that I always wanted to be a salesperson and I always wanted to do that, like from a child as wanting to be a ballerina or an astronaut. But I fell into sales, which I think is what most people do when they get into that world. And I was very lucky that I worked for a company for many years that trained us at an incredible level as the sales department. And so I became good in sales. I became successful at selling myself. At the same time, that company was also a training company. They trained in financial education. So I started to train for them as well. And I liked both of those worlds. And it was just a matter of time before those two things combined. So I started to train in the sales domain, which is something that I'd had the skill set from the training that they had given me. So again, nice and organic growth in that way. And in the last 4 or 5 years is where I've been solopreneuring it, kind of training for myself, and it's brilliant. I wouldn't have it any other way. I love it.
That's great. So, what has been one of your biggest failures or scary moments in sales? And what did you learn from that?
Okay, good question. So when you say scary moments, do you mean as a buyer or as a seller? Because I've got
I
examples from
see.
both.
For you as a seller, let's say.
As a seller. Okay, so the one that always comes to mind here, and it's something I always talk to my clients about because it was a really big learning moment, painful experience, but nearly always those are the same thing, aren't they? So I worked for a company that taught financial education, and they sold packages of between £10,000 ish to £60,000 ish. So it's about 80,000 US dollars, I think, ish on the upper end. And I had an experience, which I'm sure a lot of salespeople would have done the same thing, but I didn't handle it very well. Where I had a guy that said to me, "I want to go with the top package, so the £60,000 one." And I went, "Great, good, let's get your deposit taken and sign everything and get going." A few weeks later, he cancelled and I had to give my commission back. So it was extremely, obviously, painful from having to give my commission back. By the way, I think that's a really good system to have because it means your salespeople have to ensure that the sale is really done. And what it highlighted to me is that I did not ask the right questions and I didn't handle it very well. I got what my old sales mentor would have always called happy ears. So I heard, "Let's go for the top package." And I went, "Great, let's do that." What I should have done is check. Are you sure that's something you want to do? Do you have any concerns or anything that might change in future? What could be happening? In this particular case, he previously referenced to me weeks before in passing that his sisters had essentially raised him and they were very important in his life. And I'd kind of ignored it as part of the entire process. And it was his sisters, weeks later after he'd signed up and paid, that found out that he'd invested this amount of money and were outraged and essentially assumed that their little brother had been missold. And so they came in demanding a refund. So the decision was no longer his, it was somebody else's. And what I should have done, knowing, because he'd already told me about his sisters, is ask him, "What will your sisters think of this? What's their input? Would you like them to be part of the process? What do you think they'll think?" I did none of that. I got happy ears, got the deal done, and then got it undone. So lesson learned, ask the right questions, do the proper process, and you shouldn't have to experience those things.
I see. Thank you for sharing that story. And how about one of your best experiences as a salesperson?
So this was also a difficult situation, but it ended up being amazing. And I'm it ended up also being one of the easiest sales I've ever done. So again, this was years ago. I was assigned to work with a guy who was, so I was in my early 20s, maybe 20, and he was in his 60s, just sold a business, looking to retire. Very typically, if you know the disc profile wheel, he was a D, so, or red, or whatever people call it, that thing. I call them lions. Very typically dominant personality type. And I was quite intimidated by this guy, and I didn't quite know how to handle it. He was assigned to work with me, and he immediately said, "No, I'm not working with her." And my sales mentor at the time, her name's Keely, and she's brilliant. She was there over from the States, and she basically coached me through every step of the way. So none of this is actually my own skill set. It came from using what she told me, which then helped to embed that skill set into me. And my response to him was something along the lines of, I get it. If I were you, I probably wouldn't want to work with me either. Out of interest, what is it that is holding you back? And he said my age. He said, "You're too young." To which I said, "Okay, how old would you like me to be to feel more comfortable?" I would never have said that naturally. That would never have come from me, but it's what Keely encouraged, and it worked very well. So we sort of went, okay, but I'm not going to do this part of the process. We did that. He then said to me before he came to this event, he said, "I'm not going to speak to you whilst I'm there. I'm going to make my decision myself." Okay. So he turned up to the event, and on the first break, he had a question for me. He wanted to sit down with me. And Keely had said to me, "Don't let him." I was like, "What do you mean? This is my job. My job is to sell to these people. And how can I do that if you won't let me talk to him?" But I can see in hindsight what she was doing here. So I'd said to him, "Oh, actually, because you told me you didn't want to work with me whilst you were here this weekend, all of my breaks are full. So if you still want to talk to me at the end of the day, we'll do that then." And he was a bit, "Oh, okay," a bit taken back, but okay. And he spoke to me at the end of the day. I'll speed the story up. We got to the last day, and he said, "I want to move forwards with a whatever package. And this is the bravest thing I've ever done in sales and the best thing I've ever done in sales." He'd got his credit card out, it was on the table. "I want to move forward with this package." And I pushed his credit card back across the table and said, "I'm not willing to take your money." Which I was so scared of doing that because I thought he'd go, "Okay," and leave. And he was shocked. Why? And I said to him, "For this entire process, you've been quite resistant to the entire thing. I wouldn't want it to be that some things happened and you've been sold to essentially over the last few days and you're moving forward with something you don't really want to do because it hasn't seemed like you've wanted to the whole time. So sleep on it, call me in the morning." His response was like, "No, I'm here. Just let me do it. I know what I want to do. I'm not an idiot. I know what my decision is." And I kept, no, call me tomorrow. He called me at 9:01 the next day to say, "Are you going to stop being silly now, Becky? Or are you going to take my money?" It's like, "Okay, if you insist." So it was something that it's a concept called pendulum. It comes from Sandler training. That essentially is, don't push people. If they want to make the decision, let them do that. Don't be the salesperson. Especially with this guy. If at any point in that process I'd have been pushy, he probably would have disappeared. So it ended up being one of the easiest sales I've ever made because I barely spoke to the guy and I actually pushed back. And he was asking me if he could please spend some money. And it was something that showed me that, oh, okay, I don't have to be pushy in order to get results here. I can actually back off from people and it can work quite well. Ended up that we had a lot more trust between us. We built that relationship over years, a few upgrades in that time, referrals in that time. We got on very well. That I'm sure if I'd have handled it differently, he would never have come back and there wouldn't have been any relationship at all. So I'm very glad I did that. Very glad I enacted what Keely taught me to do. And it really proved a point on so many levels. And it's something I've done ever since and taught ever since.
It's interesting that you say that was one of the easiest sales you ever made because I think it's one of the hardest sales you ever made.
Both at the same time, yeah.
You didn't chase after the shiny object. You basically demonstrated maturity instead of voicing maturity, saying, "No, I'm old enough," and trying to play into his frame.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that helped. With the first example, it looked like perhaps the buyer was looking to trust you. Perhaps he trusted you too much. And the second one, initially anyway, he didn't trust you enough. So it seems like trust is really important in that relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
as the seller, if you can demonstrate that you're thinking of them and you're trustworthy, it seems like that helps with the sales relationship. Do you know
Absolutely.
where does or where do you think nervousness comes from? Because there is a different energy when money is on the table. As a salesperson, where does nervousness come from, do you think?
So I think it's a really interesting question, and people ask me this a lot. The nervousness comes from both sides, and it creates more nervousness for both sides. So often, buyers are nervous going into sales conversations because we don't want to be pushed, we don't want to be pressured, we want to make the right decision. We don't know about the product, am I going to afford it? All of that. From the seller side, they often have pressure, be that because they're salespeople working for an organization putting quotas on them, or they're an entrepreneur or a founder that are trying to secure funding or something like that. But there's pressure to perform. Comes from the pressure that the outcome needing to be a certain thing. So for salespeople, what they'll often do is be very concerned about, will this person buy from me or not? Will they invest or not? What's going to happen at the end? What objections might I get and how am I going to bat them away? But often if we detach from the outcome and instead focus on our process, who am I talking to? What do they need from me? What do they already know? What questions should I ask? What should I understand? How should I explain it? If we focus on the process, the outcome will be what it will be. And if we've done the process well, often the outcome is favourable. But if it's not, but we've done our process right, then the outcome is what's right for both sides anyway. So it detracts from that nervousness and that pressure because we're not caring so much about what they decide in the end. We're caring about, are we following the right process and are we having the right conversation?
Sales sometimes gets a bad name. Do you think that's because people are trying to push what they want on the other person without understanding them first?
In a nutshell, yes. It's really fascinating because I've had the pleasure and the fortune to be able to work with people all over the world, and I mean every continent bar Antarctica, so everywhere. And I ask this question nearly always at the start of working with somebody. I'll ask them, as a buyer, what do you hate about salespeople? And I get the same answers from all over the world, every industry. Salespeople lie, they exaggerate, they manipulate, they're pushy, they don't take no for an answer, they're annoying, they call me too much. I get the same answers all the time. And so, unfortunately, what makes sales get a bad name is salespeople's behavior. But a lot of times, salespeople, in my experience anyway, are not actually trained on how to have proper sales conversations. They are given product knowledge training for a couple of weeks and off you go, crack on. And you need to hit these numbers. And if you don't have a job. And so they do everything that they know, even though as buyers they know that they don't like it, they do everything that they know that salespeople do to try and hit those numbers. And then they just reinforce that disconnect. And what it means is buyers often have this barrier of anti-sales, right? I don't want to tell you the truth. I don't want to tell you what I actually want. I don't want to tell you what my real objections are because you're just going to push me. So buyers then often lie. We'll say things like, oh, I left my card in my car. I'll be back. And then we leave and we don't come back. Or, yeah, I'll call you tomorrow. And then we don't. Buyers do it all over the world. So buyers then fuel sales behavior that becomes more pushy. The sales behavior then fuels more of the buyer's behavior, which is push back and lie. So all we need to do in the sales side is disarm our buyers as soon as possible. Get past that anti-sales barrier to a transparent, effective communication as soon as we can by not being the typical salesperson. And then it's just easy. It's just a conversation with a human, which most of us know how to do.
I think it's all about people at the end of the day. Have you ever tried to point for a dog, like point at something? Have
Yeah.
you experienced that?
Yeah, I have two cats. It doesn't work quite in the same way, but yeah, I have.
Perhaps it's similar with cats, but I know with dogs anyway, they just look at your finger. They don't look at what you're pointing at. And I think we as humans have the same problem when we're performing a role. So novice actors, I understand, have trouble talking to the person in the audience without looking at the camera. A podcaster perhaps isn't having an authentic conversation with the guest because they're thinking, oh, this is being recorded. And in sales, you're thinking, I have to hit my targets. I have to get this commission because I've got this and that planned, instead of just thinking about the people. It's all about the people.
Hmm.
And yes, there's like a language and a grammar to the role that you're playing. And once you learn those rules, I think then you should just forget about them kind of and just let them kind of dissolve and go
Yeah,
back to the people. What do you think about that?
absolutely agree with you. I remember so a lot of my training for the company that I worked for a long time came from Sandler. And it's something that's kind of embedded over time, and then I've learned different things added to it and whatever. But I remember maybe after a year or two realizing, like, oh, they're just teaching me how to have normal conversations. This isn't a sales technique or a tactic. Yes, there are tools that you learn, but you almost come full circle of exactly that, of going, oh, this isn't a ask this question because then you're going to get something out of them. It's just be curious about the person you're speaking to. Ask them questions. Figure out what they need. If they don't need what you have, okay. And that's okay. If they do need what you have, ask more questions. Do they really need it? Same way you would in any other conversation in life. When we converse with people that we don't have an agenda with, we'll tend to just be curious about them. And what about this? And when did you do that? And why would you do that? Just need to apply that across business as well and just have human conversations with real people, caring about the outcome for them and what they want to do, and flow with it. And those tools just end up becoming embedded as part of a normal conversation.
I like that. Lead with curiosity and being like not attached to the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
With 8 billion of us, I'm sure there's someone who's looking for what you're selling. And if not, perhaps there's information in there for you to take in. So you also help people with their speech and their presentation and their communication, like you mentioned, from sales into whatever, a presentation to a board perhaps, or investors. What is one thing that someone can do right now that will have a measurable impact on their speech?
So there are multiple tools that people could do that are relatively easy. But the best thing I would actually recommend is film yourself. Because when filming yourself, and by the way, so on the presentation side of things, I work with a company called London Speech Workshop, LSW for short. And they teach a lot of people about presentation skills, interview practice, being more confident in their communication, all of that. And in those sessions, we will often film people at the start and film them at the end, or voice record them as much as we can. I'm yet to work with anyone that loves that process. Most people hate it. They don't want to watch back the videos of themselves or hear their voices. However, doing that is the best way to be as objective as possible and as self aware as possible to then know which bits you do need to work on. I work with so many people that will say, wow, I didn't realize that I didn't look at you the entire time you were filming. I didn't realize that I was looking down. I didn't realize how quickly I speak. I didn't realize how many filler words I use or filler noises, ums and ahs. And then as you go and you work on those things and you realize, like, oh, that's something that I should probably change. You practice that and you get better at it and you keep filming, then has the same, or actually a different application in that it fuels your confidence. Because you watch a few videos down the line, a few weeks down the line, and you say, wow, I sound so much more confident. I seem so much more knowledgeable, even though I know the same thing. I sound so much more authoritative, or whatever it is that we're trying to produce. Objectively recording and watching that back is the best thing you can do to know what to work on and to see it progress, whether you're working with anybody else or not. So the short answer is record yourself. The one thing we can do to get better at speaking.
What are a few things that someone is noticing when they're listening to another person speak or watching another person speak?
And people ask me this a lot because I think they want the answer to be fast speech or fillers or eye contact or gesture or posture or whatever. And they are noticing those things, but not consciously. So most listeners or audience members or people in your team in a meeting, whoever's the other side of that conversation, are not consciously thinking, what is that person doing with their eyes? What is that person doing with their face? How does their voice sound? How much are they pausing? What's their posture doing? What they are thinking is this person engaging or not? Is this interesting to listen to or not? Does it make sense or not? So more general things. What that can then mean is that people say, oh, I'm not naturally engaging, say, or I get nervous in front of groups and so I don't come across charismatic. And I need to be more charismatic. What do I do? And that's a really hard thing to do if you're not naturally a certain way, to just be a different way. But it's actually made up of all of those little components. Your voice, your hands, your face, your pausing, your gesture, everything that we're doing in those little small components add up to, do I sound like I care about what I'm saying or not? Or whatever it is that the audience care about. And so that can often make people feel a lot better if they're not naturally good speakers, that they can just take it a step at a time, a component at a time, to create more of the impression that they want to create, which is typically being interesting, engaging, authoritative, confident, is typically the things people want to come across as. And that's what the audience will then pick up on without knowing that it's a combination of those things.
In your memory, have you ever been in a situation where someone ticked all those boxes in person and then later, maybe you were doing something else, maybe it was the next day, you actually changed your mind about your initial decision about them, whether that be go through with the sales or go through with the partnership?
Do you mean, sorry, could you expand a little bit more on that?
Has there been a situation, for like perhaps in a sales situation, where you said yes, you felt like you were on board with what they were pitching you,
Mm-hmm.
but then after you left the interaction, you're maybe slower thinking or you had a reconsideration and you actually changed your mind? I was wondering if there was a shift where someone perhaps seemed to get it right in the initial interaction, but there was something else missing or that it changed your mind afterward.
Yes, good. So it's kind of more like a buyer's remorse thing, right? So you kind of buy into it and then maybe regret it afterwards or change your mind. Yes. So my personality type, if we think disc again, I'm I. Well, I call those people dolphins, but whatever, same thing. That we are typically more social, friendly, like to feel liked, like to like people, that kind of thing, make connection. And so I'm more easily led to emotional buying than maybe others might be. So I'll give you an example of this. I was walking through a mall once years ago, and I walked past this guy who smiled at me and he said, "You don't like adventure, do you?" And I went, "Yeah, I do." And we had this conversation
Prove
about
it.
adventure, exactly. And I ended up buying paintballing, which I don't like because I played it as a kid and I cried. I never want to play paintballing again. It hurts. But I bought a bunch of paintballing event vouchers almost that sat in the cupboard for years, were never used, and then expired. And immediately afterwards, I thought, why did I do that? I don't even want to. But I'd got caught into the kind of funniness of the conversation and the connection there with this guy that made me laugh. And it's something that I always teach with my clients that we have to be really aware of, that you don't want somebody to buy from you because they like you, because they're going to walk away from that interaction and care less about the fact that they like you and more about whatever they've just spent. Ideally, we want people to buy because they've genuinely come to the conclusion that it's the right thing for them and they respect and trust you, which is different than being liked. So I definitely fall into that trap all the time as a buyer, very aware that I do. So I have to rein it in myself. And it's also a trap I try not to fall into on the sales side, that, oh, we're getting along, so this must mean you're going to buy and you're going to want to buy, but maybe not.
That seems to align with what I call a short term win for a long term loss. in
Mm-hmm.
certain situations. There might be like some kind of scam or some kind of short win where you get the sale or something, but it doesn't lead to a partnership that could build bridges or a space colony. And so I think it goes back to that issue of trust, where if you have the trust, I think the results could exceed your imagination. So you kind of limit yourself by being focused on the outcome, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It all comes back to that. It's if you're focused on outcome, as in I need X amount of dollars, pounds, whatever, by the end of the month, that's what you focus on. Then you're not building genuine human connections. You're not caring about the other side. You're not doing what's genuinely best for them. And most of the time, buyers aren't idiots. They'll see through that. So it doesn't help anyone to think in that way. We just have to shift our focus.
High stakes, asking someone out, pitching to an investor. What's something we should be mindful of?
Again, good question. So typically, high stakes increases the nervousness, right? We feel more uncomfortable. And usually, what that means when people are speaking is that they speak quicker, they don't pause as much, they don't breathe as much, which then makes it harder to be less nervous because you're not breathing, you're physically not calming your body down. So, one thing, and it sounds silly because it's so simple, but one thing we can do if we're in social settings, whatever that may be, that are high stakes or cause more of that pressure, is to breathe more. So within London Speech Workshop, there's a coach that shared with the rest of us that she does this technique that she'd heard of online. I think Andrew Huberman mentions it as well, where it's 2 breaths in, so, and then 1 long breath out. So 2 in, 1 out. And that really calms you down. It can Google it. I don't know the science behind it, but I've tried it myself and it seems to work. So you can do that ahead of whatever scary situation you're about to go into to calm your body. Whilst you're actually having that conversation, of course, you don't want to stop every so often and breathe in a weird way. So you just want to pause more, take more breaks, speak in smaller chunks. Again, that's something that LSW are very good at teaching their clients, so that you can breathe, physically breathe more, calm yourself down. Will also give you more heads up if you start to ramble, and it's easier for the other side to understand you as well. Everybody wins. So pausing and breathing, very simple thing, but something that really helps in those high pressure situations.
Who are some speakers that you admire?
Good question. So again, I get asked this a lot and I find it hard to answer because there are so many across loads of different disciplines.
Let's take out acting
Typically,
and politics.
yeah, I was going to say typically politics is where you'd go there. So okay, I'll tell you what. So I often talk about these guys. These are 3 scientists. I think they're physicists, but we'll say scientists more broadly. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Brian Cox, and there's a lady called Michelle, I think it's Thaler, might be a silent H and be Taller, Thaller. What's brilliant about them is because they are science educators, they are speaking about things that most of the population, we don't understand. We don't think in the way that they think, we don't know what they know. And yet they're able to articulate these complex foreign ideas in ways that the layman can understand. And that's something I hugely admire about speakers, because most people that I interact with think, what do I know? What do I want to say? Get it out my brain. They don't think, how will the audience receive this? What do they already know? What do they need to know? What's important for them? And then frame their language accordingly. So those 3 speakers do that very, very well. They care about what they're saying. They're passionate about that. It's again one of the elements that LSW push, which is authenticity. Speaker cares about what they're saying. And they care about the audience being able to understand and follow. They're connecting with the audience, which then equals more engagement. Again, it's an equation that LSW use all the time. Care about what you're saying, care about the audience, and then they will care. And those 3 speakers do that brilliantly. So I would recommend looking at them if you're interested.
I think it might have been Wired they had a YouTube series where they had experts explain concepts to people of 5 different age groups, all the way down to primary school, something like quantum computing. And it was really
Hmm.
interesting to watch how the language shifted and using creativity to communicate. Have you heard of that or seen that?
I haven't seen that exact thing, but it's definitely something that I talk about and look at things like that all the time in what I do. It's basically understanding your audience, essentially, is what that is, and then reframing the same content that you know in different ways to different people for them to be able to understand it.
When you mentioned that many people try to communicate everything they know to you without perhaps understanding what you might understand or how that might best be conveyed to you, it reminded me of something that I struggle with, which is being worried that you don't think I'm smart enough to talk to you or smart enough to do this thing. So I try to use big words or demonstrate this in different ways. And often I'm trying to juggle 2 things at once instead of just taking a breath and trying to communicate, which ironically would probably take care of the issue. And what I've noticed in my experience is some of the smartest people I've met see through, like, you could communicate to them in any way. They're constantly curious and just listening, and they're able to actually extract really interesting things from what you share, and it can become very collaborative. So,
Hmm.
not that I'm here to give advice, but just offer an observation, kind of letting go and going back to, like you said, care about the message, care about the audience, and just try to communicate that.
Absolutely. It's something that it happens across every social interaction. I think people, when they go on dates, might do that, try and make themselves appear more intelligent than they might be, or use bigger words or whatever. It's also true in sales. A lot of the time, salespeople try to project themselves as the expert. And so they'll use language that is maybe quite complex. Most of your buyers don't know that language and will not say to you, I don't know what you mean. And what that means is they're not going to buy from you because they don't understand what you're saying. But they're not going to say to you, you use that word, I don't know. Because they're also thinking, I don't want to come across not smart, or I don't want to come across stupid. What I always think, exactly to your point there, David, is to kind of let go of that, let go of whatever the interpretation would be the other side, and just think about how best would somebody else understand what I'm saying, rather than what do they think of me. Kind of take that focus away from myself and more onto your content and your audience. It takes a lot of the pressure away, and you can be more stupid, and it's okay. You'll get through life just fine and not need to have the world's best vocabulary to be able to be successful.
So, bellaverdetraining.co.uk.
That's the
Is
one.
there anywhere else that you'd like to direct people to follow what you do and perhaps avail themselves of your services?
Yes. So if it's anything sales or leadership focused, my associates take care of the leadership stuff, they're brilliant. Then LinkedIn, Becky Hayman, you'll find me, and also the website you just mentioned, bellaverdetraining.co.uk. If it's anything to do with more general communication tools, presenting, public speaking, confidence around communication, londonspeechworkshop.com. The name of the company is London Speech Workshop. I coach their clients in those things, but there's also a bunch of other coaches that are brilliant in that world that have specialities in different things. So also worth looking at that and seeing who you think might be able to help you with whatever you're looking for there.
Is there anything we didn't touch on in sales or speaking or leadership or anything that you'd like to say?
I think generally just on the sales side, just to wrap that up, I think a lot of people approach sales as if it's like a fight between the buyer and seller, and I'm here to argue with you until I push you over the line, kind of thing. But that actually sales can be an experience that's enjoyed by both sides and is fruitful for both sides if you kind of just let go of it a little bit and just have a conversation. So the less you think about it as a fight or a competition, and the more you think about it as a conversation, the easier it will be and the better you'll do. So just to, I know I've already said that to a certain extent, but to wrap it up into a smaller statement, that's what I would want to end on there.
All right. Well, thanks, Becky. That was interesting.
Thank you very much.